Hi, we're Diamond and Silk, and we love the Naked Truth Report.
Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells. I'm happy to be here. And wasn't that fantastic having Mike Lindell last week? And wasn't it fantastic him telling us that, Trump is going to be installed back in the White House in August? Do you believe it? We all hope it. Hey, listen, we're still waiting for the Durham report, right? I mean, we all hope and pray that this is what's going to happen, particularly after seeing Biden's performance at the G7 summit, his speech that he delivered, particularly after seeing Kamala Harris interview with Chester, Mr. Holt, and I think he asked her something like, have you gone to the southern border yet? And her response was something like, I haven't gone to Europe yet, or something. I mean, they're just incompetent. They're like below mediocre. It's mediocrity we're dealing with now. It's weakness. It's weakness. So we hope that Mike Lindell, what he told us, we hope everything is true. We're skeptical. We're cautiously skeptical. Is that how you say it? Because we still haven't seen the Durham report. Also, we just heard, Dan Bongino has a show I heard on Fox. On his show is called Unfiltered, where he said one of the deep state actors, I think her name is Susan Hennessy. She was a woman. She worked for the Brookings Institute. You know, the Brookings Institute was pushing that Russian collusion narrative, pushing the legitimacy of the Steele dossier. Despite, you see, we went through all of this stuff. And when, I'm still taking my courses at Hillsdale College, like I mentioned last week, I did the course on the week before last, I did the course on World War II. This week, I did the course called, what is it called? The American Story, the Great American Story, The Land of Hope. Well, I'm going to talk about World War II and tie it into the Land of Hope. It is important that Americans know the history of America. It's important to have a deep and thorough, a wide and deep knowledge of American history, because you're able to put things in proper perspective and context, right? For instance, World War II. We know when you look at the overarching, when you see the big picture, World War I led to World War II. When you look at the big picture, yes, you can see that, yes, it is conceivable. It's possible. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's likely that China would release a bioweapon on America. When you look at the overarching history of the world, there are competing countries. And that's why this globalism, they're competing and conflicting countries. It's ever so clear with World War II and World War I. With World War II, you had the Axis, which was what? Germany, Italy, and Japan. And then you had the Allies, United States, Russia, believe it or not, and Great Britain. And the whole world, it was called World War II. It was a world event because literally the world was involved. And a Chinese scientist recently said, military scientist said, World War III will be fought with biological weapons. It's conceivable that yes, because countries are in competition for dominance. After coming out of World War II, America was the leading country. Why? Because what she provided, she was after after the turn of the century, she went through industrialization and she was able to provide assistance in terms of weaponry and other things. Her GDP was such that she could provide military materials at a level that was superior or supreme. Victor Hansen is the lecturer on the World War II. You guys should take it to learn some stuff. 64 million people died in that war. More civilians than folks involved, military folks, enlisted fighters. More civilians died, and as I said last week, Japan and Russia lost more than anyone, more civilians than any country. Japan controlled territory that extended from the Indian Ocean to the Aleutians and from the Wake Island to Mongolia. Can you believe? It was Japan's militarism and Germany's expansion and Italy's fascism. I think, you see, Americans do not today have no appreciation for this history. It serves them no purpose. They don't read it, they don't know it, they're not interested. But they would, if they learned it, they would be able to assess today more accurately. They would be able to make a better assessment. But they have no interest, and they're not learning in schools. And in fact, with this critical race theory, the young kids are being taught to hate America. They're being taught hate. They're being taught victimization. Oh, you're a victim. In 2021, you're a victim of oppression. You're a victim. This is the system. You're the victim of white supremacy. My dad served in World War II. Do you think he was thinking he was a victim of oppression when he was serving for the country, serving for America as a soldier? You think he was thinking, oh my God, I'm a victim of America? He was in that war as a young man. So this is why I'm very disappointed in the educational system of America. But this has been going on for decades. This just didn't happen yesterday. This happened before we were even born. This was going after World War II. Then we had the Cold War. And America was leading. And you see, I want to tie this into, I was listening to Biden at the G7 summit, and he's talking about globalization. He's talking about the main concern of the globe, the existential threat to the world is climate change. Can you imagine? First of all, that's not no one believes our media people anymore. No one believes our medical industry anymore after seeing the emails from Fauci. They have no credibility. They have no legitimacy. We're not going to buy into the fact that climate change is the existential threat facing the world. And therefore, we should spend all this money greening the world because climate change is our existential threat. Listen, with those emails being released, we don't know what went down exactly. And Biden isn't the person to figure it out. I was just driving into the station. I was just listening to Face the Nation. I think Chuck Todd I don't know if it was pre-recorded or not, but they were talking about how cyber attacks, ransomware, on America's infrastructure is now a major issue for America. We're facing frequent cyber attacks on our infrastructure. Well, you know what you think now? You think, well, listen, after what Mike Lindell told us about the scientific evidence that he discussed in Absolutely 9.0, listen, if China was able, and other countries were able to attack our election process, our election system in 2020, and get away with it. They think they're getting away with it, unless Mike isn't able to prove his case with the Supreme Court. China thinks they're getting away with it. Well, wouldn't you think that now other countries plus China would continue in that vein, would continue to attack America. This is the new front. This is the new way of warfare, is cyber attacks on the system. This is the way to weaken America and to put a weak guy, a weak leader in charge who has no clue what is going on. I mean, doesn't it make sense? And this is why our media is not on the side of the American people. And neither are these deep state actors. You know, I just heard that this woman, Susan Hennessy, also there's an article written in Vanity Fair. Her name is Catherine, I think it's Catherine Ben or something like that. Let's see, where did I write that? Catherine something, she wrote an article for Vanity Fair talking about the COVID, I forget the title, but it's in Vanity Fair. But in that article, I wrote it down somewhere. I'll find it at the break. She talks about the fact that anything that Trump said regarding COVID-19 was not viewed as credible because he's a white supremacist. In other words, she was suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. She's showing her bias. Journalists are supposed to be not biased, they're just supposed to report the facts. But every time she would talk about Trump, she would say, this right-wing leader, white supremacist, this is in Vanity Fair, okay? So we know that the elites, the establishment, the deep state folks, the DC elites, which the founding fathers talked about, how the administrative state, there will be factions, an administrative state of experts and elites like Fauci's and these journalists. They have their agenda. They have their bias. They're human too, right? Human nature remains the same throughout time. And if you study history, you realize that. You realize that that's the constant throughout history, is human nature. So this woman who's writing this article for Vanity Fair, she cannot dispense with her bias. And she was saying that, the information that changed. You see, when Trump would talk about hydrochloroquine or all these treatments for the coronavirus, immediately everyone in the media, including social media, they dominate the air. They dominate the airwaves. They dominate the landscape. And so the American people aren't being properly informed. So when Trump talked about hydrochloroquine and ivermectin and all Z-Pak and all that stuff as treatments, therapeutics for COVID-19, can you imagine all the people that could have been saved possibly because of if they were able to take hydrochloroquine, if they were able to take the therapeutics? And that's another thing. Why isn't the medical establishment telling the people, like Dr. Shiva talks about, trying to inform the people about how to boost their immune system instead of, take a vaccine? The medical establishment, and they're pushing these vaccines like nobody's business. They want us all vaccinated. And there's another theory out there that I got from this Rainer Fuelich. He's a German lawyer, and he's on the War Room with Bannon. He says that this is his idea, this is his theory, that that the leak of the China virus, COVID-19, was maybe accidental, but it's being used. This leak of the China virus is being used as an excuse for a PCR test pandemic. The real pandemic is the PCR test. So the PCR test is the test that determines whether or not you have coronavirus, whether or not you have it. And it's something to the effect that, and this PCR test was developed by, his name is Kerry Mullis. In fact, I'm going to have my engineer, I got a piece of Kerry Mullis talking about, he developed the PCR test. I'm going to have the engineer play it in a second. But what I want to say right now is that this German lawyer, Rainer Fuelich, says that the real pandemic is the PCR test, and that the establishment folks are the deep state folks, are the globalists, or whoever, the people who are like pulling the strings on the world, the people that are trying to control the world and control the people and make all the money doing it. They're the ones that are using this China virus to have all Americans or the whole world take this PCR test. And this PCR test, if it goes through so many cycles, like 45 or 27 cycles, it will give false positives. In other words, all these folks that are coming out being tested positive for coronavirus aren't positive, you see. And if you're positive for coronavirus, then they give you the vaccine. So in other words, he's saying, and he's been studying this and examining it and interviewing over 100 folks. He says this has been planned for the last 10 years. And they were able to use the leak of this virus as an excuse. And using this PCR test, they run it at 27 cycles, and so they're getting false positives. So all these folks that, when you remember how they would have the numbers of people, on the news, when you would see, they would always run have a tally of the number of people who are testing positive for coronavirus. So you see, it's all sort of like it's a game being played on the world stage. We aren't positive, folks. These are false positives. In fact, he said it's 97% false positives. And when you run 27 cycles with this PCR test. Are you guys following me? Anyway, Jose, can you play the Carrie Mullis audio right now, please?
What is it? What is it about humanity that wants to go to all the details and stuff and listen? These guys like Fauci get up there and start talking. He doesn't know anything really about anything, and I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine, and he should not be in a position like he's in. Most of those guys up there on the top are just total administrative people, and they don't know anything about what's going on the bottom. Those guys have got an agenda, which is not what we would like them to have, being that we pay for them to take care of our health in some way. They've got a personal kind of agenda. They make up their own rules as they go. They change them when they want to, and they smugly, like Tony Fauci, does not mind going on television in front of the people that pay his salary and lie directly into the camera. You can't expect the sheep to really respect the best and the brightest. They don't know the difference, really. I mean, I like humans. Don't get me wrong, but basically, the vast majority of them do not possess the ability to judge who is and who isn't a really good scientist. I mean, that's a problem. That's a main problem actually with science, I'd say, in this century, because science is being judged by people. Funding is being done by people who don't understand it. Okay, who do we trust? Fauci? Fauci doesn't know enough to, if Fauci wants to get on television with somebody who knows a little bit about this stuff and debate him, he could easily do it because he's been asked. I mean, I've had a lot of people, president of the University of South Carolina asked Fauci if he'd come down there and debate me on the stage in front of the student body, because I wanted somebody who was from the other side to come down there and balance because I felt like, well, these guys can listen to me, but I need to have somebody else down here that's going to tell me the other side. But Fauci didn't want to do it.
That's Carrie Mullis, who developed the PCR test. He has since died. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He developed this test, PCR test, that determines whether or not you're positive for coronavirus. And I think somehow they gave it to someone else. They gave the notoriety for developing the test to someone other than this Carrie Mullis or something. But the PCR test cannot determine, if you run it for so many cycles, it will give a false positive. So when we're looking at all these people who are testing positive for coronavirus, it's not accurate. And yet they're using that. Oh, there's so many people with coronavirus. There are hundreds of thousands. Oh my gosh. They're inflating the numbers. They're inflating the numbers because you don't know. Listen, you don't know if you don't have any symptoms. You don't know if you have coronavirus or not. I even got sick late December, early January, and wasn't my breathing. I was coughing all the time. And I was just coughing. And I just had to rest. I went to the doctor and they said, I was thinking I had bronchitis. I've never had bronchitis. So I wanted to get an x-ray to make sure my chest was clear. Because I heard on TV that someone had died from pneumonia or bronchitis or something. So then I got afraid and I went. This was late December, early January of 2020. And I went to the doctor and they took a chest x-ray and my chest was clear. And they said she prescribed me with antibiotics. But I just had to I slept it off for 2 or 3 weeks. I just slept. And then I could have had coronavirus or something. I don't know. But the thing of it is there are people, if they don't have symptoms and yet they're testing positive for coronavirus, this enables them to vaccinate. You see how hard and fast they're pushing this. They're even providing incentives. You can get baseball tickets or something like that, or football tickets if you get the vaccination. Let me tell you something. This is the last thing you need to get is this vaccination, because it's coming out that this virus is like a seasonal flu, and a lot, or maybe a little bit more or something. And a lot of these folks that had died didn't necessarily die from coronavirus. They had other things, comorbidities. They had other illnesses or something like that. In other words, I feel like the whole thing has been a sham. It's been a charade. They've been fooling the world, and it's coming out gradually and gradually. And now this is why we're happy. We want Mike Lindell, yes, we want Mike Lindell to be able to bring this evidence of the hacking, the cyber attack of China on our election. Because as I've mentioned before, there are two things, at least I say three now, there are two things that the American people insist we must get to the bottom of. And one of them is the 2020 election. We must get to the bottom of that. And the other is the COVID. And then I include also illegal immigration. You see, Kamala refuses even to go to the border. And I don't think she was even received well by the Guatemalan and Mexican president. I don't know what happened, but she doesn't have what it takes to be vice president. And this is the problem when you use superficial characteristics like someone's gender or race to exalt them to a position that they're not qualified for. Kamala Harris is not qualified to be on the world stage as a leader. For one, she flip-flops. For two, she doesn't have a deep and thorough understanding of the world and of why America is a leader and should be a leader, and why democracy should be a leader in the world. Democracies as opposed to the CCP, as opposed to communism. And maybe if she knew about the wars that were fought, World War I and World War II and the Korean War, Kamala Harris should take one of the courses at Hillsdale College and get that detailed information. Get a broader and deeper understanding of the history of America, because then you begin to appreciate what a democracy is, what freedom is, what we are actually a republic. And why that's important, because it's the people, the citizenry, that gives our consent to the government. And I'll tell you, the founding fathers would definitely not be for illegal aliens. They would not be for globalism, because the main thing is to secure the rights, secure the freedoms of the American people. Because we're giving the government the consent, and the checks and balances is checking the ambitions of the people in the government, including people in the administrative state like Fauci. He needs to be checked by us, the American people. Are you guys following me? Anyway, I'm going to take a break and we'll be right back.
It was an anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination, and about time I visited the scene of the crime. Standing behind a fence atop the grassy knoll in Daley Plaza, 20 yards from where Abraham Zapruder was standing when he filmed the murder, I knew at a glance the last and fatal shot was not fired from this position. Wrong angle. A shot from here at that time would have knocked the president to his left into Jackie. That's not what happened. The president's head snaps back, his body lifted and driven backward until it collides with the back seat. That shot came from the front. I continued walking along the fence until it curved left into and joining the overpass. Looking down at Elm Street, this is where the shot had to have come from. But why didn't any bystanders see the shooter? Glancing down, I was standing on a very large drain. If someone lifted the drain and stepped down into the hole, they would lose 3 feet. I knelt on one knee, peering through a hole at the bottom of the fence. Perfect. This is how they did it. The shooter and Confederates waited at this location. The shooter would have been notified of the president's vehicle location in the motorcade as soon as it left Love Field, the airport. As the president's vehicle slowly turned in front of the school book building and proceeded down Elm Street toward the overpass, the gunman had the president's head in his gun sight. Waiting until the vehicle came to a complete stop in the middle of the street, the gunman pulled the trigger. Stepping out of the hole, he made his escape by walking several feet away and remaining still. As first bystanders, then police, converged on him, if questioned, he took out Secret Service identification. This was brilliant. I noticed television news teams interviewing a woman below, and I crossed the street to listen in. The woman was Jean Hill. Miss Hill told the Warren Commission of running across the street, up the hill, and was stopped by a tall, thin man who flipped out identification of the Secret Service. After the last interview with a Japanese news team, which reminded me of the international interest in this assassination, I approached Miss Hill. I told her I read her testimony to the Warren Commission and that years later, at the House Select Committee on Assassinations, a Dallas police officer, Tom Tilson, told of seeing a man slip in and sliding down an embankment and entering a vehicle, then driving off at a high rate of speed from Daley Plaza. He reported the license plate and incident to homicide, but never heard back. He said the man was Jack Ruby. She thanked me and said when she told the Warren Commission of seeing Jack Ruby running from the scene, no one believed her. She asked me who were the 2 men standing 20 feet away. I told her Gayton Fonzie, an investigator with the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and Josiah Thompson, the author of 6 Seconds in Dallas. She said she would like to meet them. I walked over to the gentlemen and told them Jean Hill would like to meet them. Both their faces froze in astonishment. I led them over and made the introductions. The 3 of them started laughing and joking and talking like they were old friends. Now I was the one astonished. I silently slipped away. Driving back to California, one thought repeatedly haunted me. They got away with it. I'm Michael Calder, the author of JFK versus CIA. If you would like to learn the details of the president's assassination, get the hardcover edition of my book at Barnes & Noble and your local bookstore.
You see, they got away with it then. This is why it's important to know history. It's so important, deeply and widely. You got to know it deep and you got to know it wide. Larry Arnn, who is the president of Hillsdale College, says that if you don't know history, your knowledge is like a child, a little child, an inexperienced person. Children have no sense of how long something takes, or whether or not something weighs a lot, or if something is hard or not. But when you have history, when you know history, you're able to assess things properly. In other words, you can look at things in perspective of what went before. You see, and so you know that, yes, given the history of the world and given the nature of humans, yes, it's likely that China would use a biological weapon on America. Why? Because China would like to be a leading power of the world, because China has a communist ideology, which is antithetical to a republic government. They see us as an enemy. Victor Hansen says that America's isolationism and British appeasement and Russia's collusion, yes, Stalin colluded with Germany initially, and then they had a falling out, so to speak. But Stalin was an authoritarian, a totalitarian. Japan was operating militarism. Germany wanted expansion, and Mussolini was a fascist. Most people don't understand these ideologies are antithetical to a Republican government. Do you understand? As I said last week, Germany actually occupied all the countries that we consider the European Union today. Can you imagine? And in fact, I saw a picture of the Nazis standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Can you imagine? Can you believe that Paris, France was occupied by Nazi Germany? Can you imagine that? I think a lot of people don't understand what the war was about and why it happened. Because folks were trying to impose their ideology on their opposing faction, their opposing party. Just like they're trying, you hear about the Chinese infiltrating our universities, trying to get our trade secrets. It's competition, folks. It's human nature. It's the nature of the world. Anyway, I'll take a call now from Brent in LA. Hi, welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Brent.
Crusader Kathleen.
Hi.
Well, last week, Mike Lindell, for a whole hour, you are still the tip of the spear in Los Angeles. You're turning around the treasonous vote count by the Democrats. But I was noticing you are following in the tradition of the great Frederick Douglass by using his primary weapon for the freeing of all sorts of slaves, education. And Douglass knew that the Democrat slave masters deliberately and intentionally would keep slaves ignorant in order to keep them under control, just as they do today with their totalitarian teacher unions. And they feared most that slaves would learn not just reading, but the knowledge of the Bible, the Constitution, and the principles of freedom, liberty, and justice that we have, just as today. And so everything we're fighting, everything you're doing, has such a beautiful, long, and noble tradition.
Oh, thank you. I think it's important that everyone take those courses from Hillsdale College. There's no excuse. They're free. There's no excuse not to take them. I just did this week The Great American Story, The Land of Hope. It's an enchanting story. You want to know it. You live here.
It's just such a treasure, Hillsdale, as well as PragerU. There is so much constant information online, and nobody needs to be ignorant.
Exactly.
Because ignorance is a form of slavery. And the way we unencumber ourselves in our slavery is we have to unencumber our minds.
Exactly. And they say if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. And you see, we are repeating it.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what's also so distressing. As we learn history, we just realize, wow, we've been here before and before and before.
Right. And you can see how, yes, every now and then we're fighting wars, because that's the nature of man, to be in competition, to be in, there's no utopia. There is no utopia. If you go back to ancient history, there's no utopia. Because why? Because human nature is involved. That's just our nature.
And we can constantly improve, but as you say, utopia, that's a false ideal. And the left knows it's a false ideal. They know it's impossible, And the places with the least utopia, with the least goodness, with the least everything
Right.
of value is in the communist world.
Exactly. Thanks, Brent. Let me take a call now. Antithetical, the opposite of a Republican government. This is giving, you see, the founding fathers that came to America, they had studied everything. And, you know, when you take the course at Hillsdale College, you get to read in their constitutional reader, you get to read their primary documents, the documents that are actually written by the actual people. They're not articles written by journalists about what happened. These are the actual documents written by the founding fathers. I think it's very important. Speaking of Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln was good friends with Frederick Douglass, and he defended him. In fact, I think, wasn't Stephen Douglas, no, not Stephen Douglas. Who was Abraham Lincoln's vice president? After Abraham Lincoln was shot, then it was Johnson. What was his first? Andrew Johnson was the vice president. Yes. Oh my God. They did not appreciate, the Democrats, I'll put it this way, the Democrats were always pro-slavery. They were always pro-slavery. Let me take a call now from Carlos in Carson. Hi, Carlos. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Well, it's great that you're emphasizing the knowledge of history, because that's the only way you can connect the dots across time and detect the patterns and then notice that it's always the same players involved in all these different wars and events. And then you can see the huge conspiracy that's engulfing us and leading us, of course, towards globalism and a one-world government.
Right.
You know, if you look at the First World War, you see two international bankers, the Warburg brothers and the Rothschilds, involved in financing both sides of the contest. In fact, at the end of the First World War, when they were signing the contracts to end it, one of the Warburg brothers from Wall Street, these people from Wall Street, was representing the West, and the other side was representing, and the other brother was representing the other side. You know, it's almost comical. And then, of course, this is what they call the Hegelian dialectic, when the same powerful forces, the deep state, construct different philosophies that are antithetical to each other, so that they can create wars and all that and finance both sides. But at the end of the struggle, there's always a residue. There's always the legislation that comes out of it that's really morphing the new world order. Like, for instance, at the end of the First World War, you had the League of Nations. And, of course, the end of the First World War set the stage then for the Second World War and the coming of Hitler, which was again financed by the same international bankers out of Wall Street and the Bank of England, the Rothschilds, all them people. It's the same players all over again. And what transpired after the First World War? Well, of course, another world institution, the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, all these international forces that are leading us towards a world government. But something very important also emerged of the Second World War, which was the creation of the nation of Israel. You see, that's terribly important. It was important to all these international bankers, because that's going to set the stage for the future Messiah and Antichrist coming in and setting the world government. See, these people plan 200 years ahead of time. But anyway, it's terribly important to know history, as you're saying it.
Yes, I think it is important to know history. Yes, Woodrow Wilson was the one that went to the Treaty of Versailles, or he started the League of Nations, I think. Yeah, Woodrow Wilson, a progressive. You see, these progressives always believe in this global. The founding fathers, I want to say this, the founding fathers believed that, I think it was John Adams. No, it was the son. John Adams, the son's, what's the son's name? John Quincy Adams is the son. He said, do not go out looking for monsters. And also George Washington said, we should not form permanent allies. You see, the interest of America, our country, the Republic, America was founded on the principle that the only interest is the interest of the American citizens. That's our only interest. You see, and we've gotten into trouble. At least it's been 120 years of us being in trouble. And you see, now this is all connected now. We follow this thread now to the GS Summit. You see the whole thing? This is not, these actions, this globalism goes against the Constitution, goes against what the Founding Fathers believed in. They want us to have, they wanted the interest of the American people to be protected. But we're now, Biden is now into all this globalism stuff, the existential threat of climate change. That's what we're supposed to be talking about. And at the same time, we have China committing cyber attacks and Russia committing ransomware attacks, criminal actors in Russia committing ransomware attacks on the American people, on the infrastructure, and we're supposed to be global. We're no longer supposed to be a nation state, but yet operating as a global citizen. This is what, and Biden is so weak. He can't, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. He can't even answer questions off. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Everything everything is being fed to him. He's reading. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Someone else is pulling the strings for Biden. Wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah. Well, yes, definitely. I think I have a clue as to who's pulling the strings, and of course, it's always the international banking community, the corporate establishments. Believe it or not, the corporate establishments way at the top are really controlling both sides of the aisle. Okay, but there's another force that I see when I look into the background of a lot of our politicians. What do I see? They all come from Jesuit universities, especially most of the Democrats. Biden came from a Jesuit university. So did our governor here. What's his face? I forget his name. Our
Newsom.
From Santa Clara University, which is Jesuit. The previous governor, Brown, also came from a Jesuit university. Everywhere you look is the hidden hand of the Jesuits. You look at the communist world. Fidel Castro came from a Jesuit university. Okay, who really has been guiding the Chinese communist system since 200 years ago? The Jesuit influence. So you got to really look at their influence. In fact, I quoted you a book, the Last Pope, Pope Francis, the Last Pope, and it talks a lot about the Jesuit influence within the Catholic Church and within globalism. Okay, you got to read that book.
Okay, I'll read it. Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking of the movie 30 Coins. I mentioned that to you before, but I'll read that book, The Last Pope. So if you think maybe, yeah, because when you think about ancient history, when you think about, I don't know. I have to read the book. Anyway, let me take a call now from Angela in Los Angeles. Hi, Angela. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Hi, Kathleen. I just wanted to say, this is near history. There was something called Event 201 in October of 2019, and Bill Gates was like the guy who set it up with Bloomberg and John Hopkins, and then there were like 3 to 4 other players, and it was talking about a what if there was a pandemic. This was in October of 2019 when they did this. And then I'm just mentioning that in case people can go out. They should be able to go out and watch it. But then I heard he was denying it, but I don't know. I haven't been able to research that he's denying it. But then, remember you had the professor from Caltech on your show a couple of times? She was from China.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, and she talked about the virus and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I thought you were way ahead of the game. I'm going, she's way ahead of the game. And then also, I was so glad, really I was. There is a guy named, he has a website, Hal Turner Radio Show.
Uh-huh.
And he had a lot of information about this in 2019, or late 2019, and as it was coming out. Even some papers and stuff you would probably have to archive. But HalTurnerRadioShow.com. I mean, I hope he's still around because I haven't been able to look for him because the LA County Library System, I don't know if this has happened because I haven't been able to call the main office yet. but I try to listen to people that are on Rumble,
Uh-huh.
and I can't listen to them.
Oh.
I mean, it's really muted. It's really quiet, and I could listen to it if I had, like, Superman hearing, but,
Yeah.
so I'm just, like, curious about that.
Okay, Angela, thank you. Let's take a call now for, check me out on Rumble. It's the Naked Truth Report, TNTR, TNTR, the Naked Truth Report on Rumble. Please subscribe. Okay, George, now, welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. My wife and I had been talking from the beginning of 2020. When people had started talking about the virus in 2019 and then in 2020, and, the genome of that virus just popped up so quick, and its relationship to all of the SARS and MERS stuff that had happened years before. It seemed, as many people said, that this was the perfect coronavirus. They called it the completed coronavirus. And so I am not surprised, and no one should be surprised, when we see Anthony Fauci doling out money for this gain-of-function research for this family of viruses. And I would not be surprised if all of the, warp speed partners had already been working for vaccines for this family of virus. And this is why they were so quick, and it was so easy for them to step up with some kind of vaccine this quick, because they've been working on this stuff all along.
Well, yeah, that's what this Reiner Fuelich, Fuelluich, says. You can check out his interview with Steve Bannon's War Room on Rumble. Steve Bannon's War Room on Rumble. The interview, he's German, he's a lawyer, his name is Reiner Fuelich. He says this has been going on for 10 years, folks. Listen, when you study history, you know they're working a number on us, okay? We're like sheep to the slaughter. Don't get the vaccination. No. Okay, I'll be back next week. Thanks.